Today is our environmental panel brought to you by the Realtor Attorney Joint Committee. Our committee is a team of realtors and attorneys who work very hard to get you this educational content. So welcome, thank you for being here. And your moderator today is Maciek, and he's going to tell you a little bit about himself, introduce your panelists, and get started. So thank you.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for coming out here and learning a little bit about environmental hazards. We're going to be focusing a little bit on what we see most often, which are mold, lead-based paint, and a few other things. So at any point in time, if you have questions, you can raise your hand if it's relevant exactly to what we're talking about right then, but we will take a little, break between segments for questions about what we were just talking about. So my name is Maciek Zaremba. I'm with Fallon Realty. I've been licensed since 2004. I've been investing since 2002. So I have, smaller multifamily rentals in the area. And I've been on the REJC, the Realtor Attorney Joint Committee this is my third year now. And we have three panelists today. We're going to start off here with Jeff. Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Jeff Spanos. I'm native of Sarasota, but I've lived in Boston and the Chicago areas, and got started in the mold business after Katrina. Helped with for free at Katrina. Recognized how importance was, and from there started a business in Boston, and then moved back to Florida eventually.
And Jeff is
an assessor. Sorry.
Yeah, and he forgot to mention he's a certified mold inspector and an assessor and a remediator as well. And next,
need to move their mics closer to them. Sorry.
So I assess in Florida. I do not remediate. That's Julia's job.
Excellent. So Julia Jones, please say a little bit.
Hello, everybody. I'm Julia Jones. I am the owner of Pure Clean. We have actually two locations in the area, and we are what's called a mold remediator. We have the ability to remove mold, but we are not the ones that determine if mold is actually present. That's where Jeff comes in. So this is kind of a partnership in our two industries. In terms of our qualifications, again, we have two locations. We do water, fire, and trauma, but mold is the bulk of our business. We're one of the few, probably the only one in the area that doesn't have 3 mold certifications, and we also have a mold remediation license. So we did go through, and I've been in Florida for 40 years, very familiar with this, and so Pure Clean is, ready to help with this and excited to be part of this.
Thank you. And last is Paul Grievous. Paul is an attorney, a real estate attorney. However, in a previous life, he was a toxologist. So, Paul, if you could just say a little bit about yourself, your business, and your experience.
Absolutely. My name is Paul Grievous. I'm with Grievous Law Group in Bradenton, Florida. We're just east of downtown in the Antiques District. I've been practicing law since 2007. Prior to that, I was a scientist. I have a PhD in toxicology from the USF College of Public Health. Although it wasn't my dissertation work, I did do some work with fungal toxins, so I'm very familiar with them. I'm going to leave the technical stuff down the road here to Jeff, but as an attorney, I run into a lot of issues on both sides of the fence where somebody is upset about something having not been disclosed when there was mold or water intrusion or some kind of similar incident. So I can definitely try to provide some advice along those lines to you ladies and gentlemen here. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. So we're going to start off by taking our sheet here, and we're going to find the rider eye mold inspection. And it's right before the seller's property disclosure. And what we have here is the rider, specifically going over the obligations on the mold inspection. And Paul's going to touch on this, and then it's going to, right underneath it, we have the as-is contract and the standard contract verbiage. And this is the only difference that we have within the contracts. So, Paul, if you could just touch on a little bit about, obligations within the contract.
One thing, if you've ever trust you have gone through the as-is contract versus the standard FAR contract, you'll notice that in paragraph 19, where it has all your addenda or riders, you'll notice on the as-is contract, a number of the slots say reserved. They don't actually have the same analogous one that they have in the FAR form. Barbar has the comprehensive rider for mold, and that's in here. And, you know, it's something that you always have the option, I guess, of using, even though it's not technically one of the listed addenda in paragraph 19. But it's there, and it's important to consider doing it even if it isn't as is, because it protects you as a realtor from potential liability. It's not required technically because it's not one of the listed ones on paragraph 19. But if you look at this rider, it again talks about, you know, when mold inspection took place. It talks about, you know, as and Masha added the language from the as-is contract. You know, that talks basically about it. The big thing is that, you know, when there is an inspection that shows that repairs are needed, you put the amount of the estimate for the repairs. If it's something that somebody is willing to buy, deal with, whatever. If it's under the FAR bar, and it's under the general limit, you had a question about whether you could do it above the general limit. Generally, I couldn't find any language saying that you could do the general limit plus hold somebody accountable for the mold under the mold rider. I did not find any language yesterday or today about that, unfortunately. But if it's up to that, you know, up to that limit, if there's no other repairs, it would be presumed that the seller would have to make those repairs in order to maintain the contract. As is, if there's repairs that need to be made, if there's something that's found in the inspection, obviously the seller has the option of walking away regardless of what the amount is. Do you want me to?
So, you know, question on that. So basically, even though the as-is contract under the additional riders does not have it says reserved. It doesn't say mold inspection. We are still free to use that checkbox and then use this rider, which has a separate repair limit, defaults to $500 if a mold inspection is done and the repairs are more than that. So,
What rider?
pardon me.
What is the rider? Here?
It's, yes,
The
the
rider-
rider is paid right before the seller's property disclosure. And it's rider I mold inspection, which allows your buyer to go through, you know, a process of checking if there's any mold and then determining financial amount, how much it's gonna cost. And then go back to, right back out.
One thing I will bring to your attention is the default limit on here is $500. I'm sure that, Ms. Jones is laughing because obviously you can go quite a bit over $500 for even a modest, very small issue in one location. So if that is left blank, it's very easy to exceed that amount, the threshold.
Exactly, and I guess it could be used as a way to kind of back out after the regular inspection period if you go through that process. So thank you, Paul. We're gonna, first of all, before we move on to talking to Jeff about, the steps to take, what happens if you do find some mold? Anyone have any questions about the legal component of this document? No. All right, perfect. So Jeff, I'm sorry, do I have a question? Yes?
Does the FAR contract, you said in paragraph 19, does it actually
It's,
cover mold or is that under a testimony?
The FAR bar contract, one of the riders listed in paragraph 19 is the mold rider. The addenda in the as-is contract, there's a lot of reserved ones. It does not specifically list the mold rider, but I have been told that a lot of realtors, for CYA purposes, will issue the rider, even though they are using the as-is contract, which for most of your more modest houses, probably 3/4 of the transactions are usually as-is, not the FAR bar.
Okay.
yeah, just like the lead-based paint rider or anything else. Yeah. Can't hear Paul?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I had it close enough. Let's see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
So when representing a buyer, we should be presenting this mold inspection rider.
Well, it's,
Along
it is-
Well, the seller is usually the person. I mean, you can ask for a rider if you have any questions. You can ask for a rider even if they're using an as-is. They may refuse because they'll say, well, it's not on the list. Sorry, get it real close here. They may refuse because it's not on the list, but as a buyer's agent, you can ask for it. I mean, absolutely, it's there. If you have any questions, have the parties agree to it. I don't know why it's not in the as-is, but it's not actually named in the as-is.
Yeah, I sat on a car bar committee when we eliminated it. And I think the main reason was is when you look under the inspections, it talks about any and all inspections held during that period of time. So that would include mold, that would include everything. So that was the reason why it was eliminated, because it's redundant in the.
That makes sense, but it's still a concern for a lot of people and so when in doubt, if you think it's an issue as a buyer's agent, don't be afraid to ask for it. You're not required to do it, but why not?
Perfect. So now, next is Jeff. If a buyer suspects, from inspections that there are some, there may be some mold or something going on, tell us about what the buyer should do, what should the agent do, how should the agent guide the buyer in those scenarios?
Right, first of all, you don't say it's mold where you think it is, you say it might be microbial growth. We should get someone who's licensed to test for this. So a lot of realtors, you're very cautious, which you should be, because if you downplay it, you could be in trouble. If you make it too big as a seller, you can make it too big, it's not gonna use it. Let's do the science. So let's do a science, let's take the microbiology. Even though been doing this for almost not 20 years, I can know it's mold, but I better say, no, let's do the microbiology. I send it to a third-party microbiologist. I get the results back within 24 to 48 business hours. I can let you know what's there. And if it's something larger, like walls need to come out, then that's when we start to write a protocol. Something could be a one-page paper saying it's mold at a low level, or this is more serious. We've got to write a larger paper, and then you need to talk to a remediator. So basically, do the science. Don't say it's mold that we don't know. My car's in the back. Say let's call Jeff to see if he can do an inspection and then put us peace of mind or figure out what's next. So any questions there?
How extensive is your inspection? Do you just do an air test or what?
I do air test, 1 per 1,000 square feet, then we do one outside the baseline, that's the science. Do a full visual, I've got a 5600 blue light that I'll walk up on something and people can't see mold and I'll see it. So not trying to, find it, it's not there. Look in the air conditioning ducts, look at the plenum, under sinks. Sometimes, there's a leaky sink you don't know about. And then point all those things out in pictures and then say, again, scientifically, here's the issue, here's how to remedy it, here's what's next, is what you should do. So trying to be, bring a solution as well.
Said that using the infrared is already a good start, or is it not enough?
Infrared is good, I do infrared. Infrared is good if there's an active moisture issue. If it's been there for a while, like say hurricanes, sometimes all of a sudden there's a baseboard that's walking away with mold a year later, because the insulation inside the wall has held the water and now mold is growing from outside. So infrared will not pick that up. So then if I see something like watermarks or something suspect, like under windows particularly, I take a physical moisture meter and check under all those windows. If the ceilings have a leak, we know a prior issue, I'll check for moisture. So we do the physical samples as well, if it looks like mold, so we do a swab or a tape lift, and then the air sample, and then infrared to see if there's anything active. But under every window, I'll check with a physical moisture meter. So sometimes it's surprising, like yesterday, a couple days ago, 45% moisture under a window, you saw no problem. But then I looked outside and the caulking was compromised outside, so this whole wall had to come out.
One thing I want to mention on infrared, what it does is shows you a temperature difference. And then Jeff mentioned that he validated with a moisture meter because it could be polar for maybe the duct behind it. So the infrared is not the end all, it just gives an idea of what it's like.
Yeah, because infrared look at this whole room within a couple of minutes, and then we can at least go there. But sometimes, it's proved itself over and over again, but especially active leaks or a roof leak or something like a wall. Sometimes you go into a bathroom and you're like, oh, okay, that's leaking in the wall. You don't know it until you put a physical moisture. So,
Just a quick question, how long does that process take for people that are trying to figure out a time frame in their inspection? How long does that process take?
It depends on the size of the house. Maybe it's 2,000 or 10,000. So it's It's about 5 minutes a sample per pump, so average inspection is about an hour. Then I overnight it to Tampa lab, get the results within 24 to 40 business hours. So if nothing's there, I can give you a verbal tap and then write the report. If it's something larger, then you probably need to talk to a remediator, and here's what's going on. And so, yeah, so about an hour.
How accurate is an air test?
Yeah,
And could mold be on furniture that causes?
Yep, that's why we're doing the visual inspection, because there are some home inspectors that will just take air samples and kind of give the results and you have no idea what it is, and they don't tell you what to do. So that's kind of doing a disservice. So that's why we want to take physical samples in the dust, or most of the time we'll find it in Plymouth. So 90% of your problem often is in a air conditioning closet. You know, it's not buttoned up in the attic, and so it's pulling moisture, warm moist air from the attic into that room and creating mold on the plenum or the butyl that's on that or on the ceiling. So a lot of the problems are in HVAC. So as realtors, don't forget to look in the air conditioning closet, because most of your problems will be right there.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi.
I have a couple of questions. One is, for the first 25 years, I was in real estate when there was evidence of leaking or mold or whatever. And when we got the inspection done, they were specifically looking for that toxic black mold. Because this is Florida, and there's a little bit of whatever, not dangerous type of mold in almost every air handler.
Sure.
But now it seems like every little thing is reported, which maybe things have changed. And also, when we get the results, it's so scientific that unless you are like you or some kind of a scientist, I don't understand them, the buyers don't understand them, and so that, I don't know. We don't know what to worry about.
That's why we do science, but I'm trying to make it simple. That's why I try to do one-page paper at the end and say, here's the levels, you've got this, but this is not concerning. This is an issue. There's 5 toxic molds. The one you're talking about is Stachybotrys, and that it's hard to find because it has to be a waterborne mold. It has to come from either a gray water or water source that's been there for a while. We do find it. A banyan tree grew up in an apartment the other week and went through the standpipe and took out 2 bathrooms. There was mold. What happened? So that was Contaminate, which is another one. That's a toxic mold. It's a zero. We have some 0 tolerance mold. There's 5 of them, and so in your report, I have one of the reports that has Contaminate on that. That was that conduit that had a banyan tree grow up inside up to the plumbing. And so I try to make it simple. Try not to be sensational, just scientific. And then often the realtor will call me once they get the report and say, "Can you just make this clear to me?" And I'm like, "It's okay." But sometimes, buyers from up north who, when I grew up here, we never had mold until the energy crisis, right? Because everything was buttoned up, all the, our windows are better, our insulation is better. There wasn't sick building syndrome, because we put carpet in, all of a sudden half the people can't breathe because of the off-gassing of plastics. And so the sciences have changed and building sciences have changed, so we've got to create fresh air makeups a lot of times in our houses, and people don't understand that. So some of the remedies I bring up is saying, here's some things you can do to make this better.
And some of the laws have changed in Florida since those times. You cannot do mold remediation or true air assessing without a license. And there are folks like home inspectors that maybe can kind of do a quick test, but that's kind of like having a general practitioner say, hey, you may want to get your one just to figure it out, and you go to a specialist. But that's what Jeff is compared to a home inspector. Home inspector is going to be an issue, but to really find out what's going on, to go to someone like Jeff.
Yeah, in just a moment, we'll be going over a good report and a bad report, so we can see what to look for. But I think, I agree here, with the comment that a lot of agents don't know how to read these reports. And it's important not to misrepresent or misinform our clients, which is why Jeff will, get on a phone call with everyone who orders one to really go over what is all means. I saw a hand somewhere, yes.
Is a licensed mold remediation company required for every kind of mold on
every one of these on the list?
Most of the time not. I mean, if it's, like some aspergillus penicillium is common here, and if it's a high level, one of these reports has a high level of that, so that probably needs air scrubbing, hand cleaning, HEPA, and some fogging. Because, but most of the time, it's not high, and you're like, that's just common mold, it's not high, we're okay inside at this point during the inspection. So most of the time, not. But it's usually a waterborne issue, when the meter comes in, or if you get, sometimes you get a humidity bloom, which is, people let their temperature too high. So in Florida, humidity is the issue, not temperature. So 60% is the threshold for mold to grow. So if you're not, so people are like, well, I left my temperature at 77, so it doesn't matter. It's about no environment is static, it's always changing. And so humidity is the issue. So we'll get humidity blooms. I just had a guy that was on a 6-month mission overseas helping out and came back and every antique, every piece of furniture had mold on it. It was like a $5,000 job because his housekeeper came in and said everything was fine, but she didn't understand what was going on. And then they came in and smelled the smell. I came in with a light right up on the furniture. They couldn't see it. Showed them it's just green fuzz on all this antiques. So as realtors, I mean, humidity is huge. I mean, you can't leave your air conditioning off, you can't tip them up too high. You really have to get under that 60% threshold.
In talking about the humidity balloon, just real quick,
Yeah.
it typically does not require demolition. It is just a lot of cleaning that needs to be done and cleaning the air, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna have walls torn out from it. That's not the kind of mold that would require that kind of situation.
Right, but then all your contents are clean, so it's even more expensive sometimes, because you're cleaning everything in your house compared to just taking the wall out, so humidity is huge, I saw it.
You mentioned,
Sorry.
odor.
Oh, yeah.
Do you find that most of the time?
No, no, odor it means it's probably colonizing or growing, but sometimes, we don't smell anything. People like, I have an issue with my eyes, my skin, I'm losing my memory. What is it? You know, we'll come in and there is something, but you just sometimes, but smell usually is an indicator, but not all the time. Back in the back.
Yeah, for Florida, what temperature would you recommend people leave their house at?
Yeah. That's a hard one, because again, you're cooking, cleaning, breathing, right? You got dogs, you got children. So what I recommend is put a Wi-Fi thermostat in your house that reads humidity. Like I was in Greece in the fall and I kept my temperature as high as I could, but I was checking my humidity every day. So I can adjust my temperature on the fly. So, you know, again, I try to keep my humidity at 50% in my house. So it's 74 in my house right now. It's a little cold for my wife. She wears a sweater. Because she knows cold. And she's like, hey, we're not leaving this at 77, we're comfortable because that bumps over my threshold. So it's a science. So again, it's, you know, in informing all your clients is a hard one because they're like, I'm not there, it's my third home. And I'm like, yeah, you should somehow, you may want to buy a $20 cheap humidity reader and take it in the house when you're looking at it saying, yeah, this temperature seems to be too high. For right now, because again, temperature is a misnomer, it's humidity. Try to keep it at 50, 55, 60 is kind of, you bump it, because if it's 60 at the thermostat, it may be 75 in another room, the hot side. So there are thermostats that have the ancillary readers, you plug them in those other rooms that are hot, and the readers will read, the thermostat will read those readers and turn the air on even when you set it at a different temperature. Kind of like the old humidistat. The humidistats are kind of a failure, and in most part, they're not a great idea. They were good thought, but they often fail. So when someone puts on, and most HVAC people put it at 60, all of a sudden they get a wrong number because that's too high. So if you see those in your houses, you have a humidistat, try to put on 50. Because at least it'll start to dehumidify when it should.
I have a question regarding remediation. Obviously, you mentioned a gentleman that had some furniture and antiques that were heavily damaged. In those cases, is there a way to salvage some of these items? Clothing, for instance, I've seen where, you know, one client had clothing that went, you know, were up north. When they came back, it was, the clothing was,
Yes, very much so. We will, as remediators, when we run across an humidity balloon, that does mean cleaning every single thing. And that is behind the refrigerators and doors, because you kind of have to think of, what if you're doing baby powder everywhere, it just gets into everything. But things like that are textile generally can be just laundered. And we clean the carpet, we would get the air ducts, we don't clean air ducts, but we would have that also performed so that that negative air pressure can get all that collected. But to Jeff's point, depending on the size of the unit, and we had one that had an elevator that we had to, have the 2 stories. So that was a little bit complicated, but every surface has to be cleaned. So it can be quite expensive, but at least you're not demoing, so you're able to get cleaned and people can go in, you don't have to rebuild. But it's definitely fixable, it's just time, effort, scrubbing and antimicrobial and fogging, but absolutely.
So at this point, let's look at what a bad report looks like. Just look at the first page from our packet. And Jeff, if you can kind of go over a little bit, both of these pages are, the project name is Mr. Bad Salmon. So, Jeff, if you could just talk a little bit about what we're doing for.
Right, and these are labs, so I didn't include a 1-page paper, so I apologize for that. In hindsight, I probably should have given you a 1-page example of me interpreting this. But as you look at this, you've got an outside sample, so that's what we're basing the inside sample on the first page you turn over. And then if you look at the next page, Mr. Bad sample, you've got several molds here that are high. You've got Aspergillus penicillium, which is common, and yet it's at a 2200 level. So this is not in color. My labs are in color, so you can see there's like a circle with a line through it, which would be fully red, and which means the lab said this is a condition degree. This is too high. So they're looking at that. And then if you look down a little further, you get Contaminate. Well, you got a couple toxins. You got Alternaria, you got Bipolaris. But those are, should be, those are not in that air sample, but those are some that we always look for. But you have Contaminate here, and that is at a level, you can look at the symbols to your right. It's got like a toxic symbol and then a water drop symbol. So that's showing you that that's a toxic mold and it's waterborne. So that's something, that's a 0 tolerance mold. So we recognize if that's in the air, then we need to clean everything that's in the air. If it's on the surface, often that means it's behind the wall as well. And Stacky down a little further is the black mold you're looking for. That's not in this sample. But so anyway, that number is too high. And so we said, okay, the air at least needs to be taken care of in this sample. And this is the one that actually had the roots growing up. So we knew that the walls were compromised, but then we recognized all the air in the apartment was compromised. So all pieces of furniture, all the carpet had come out, 3 walls had come out in this sample. Okay. So that's kind of a basic, and I try not to, again, try to do the science, but try to make it clear. I don't try to scare anybody. Certainly you're trying to make some living here, but we don't want to hurt either side of the operation. Yes, sir.
So that one that you were talking about, that was toxic and waterborne.
Yeah.
The raw is 3 and the count is 100
Yeah.
and the percent is 3.6. Right. So that percent would appear to be very low.
But it's a toxic mold. So we have 5 toxic molds, and those are 0 tolerance because they've come from a water source type of mold, and that's what we're concerned about. So that has done damage to people's body. So we don't need to. And I'll have remediators sometimes. They'll have one spore, and once they're done, like go over it again because it's your house. Would you want me to do this again? Yes, you would. So it looked as a percentage of the sample. Yes, it's high. It just happens that Aspergillus penicillium is high at 79%. So we know even if we didn't have the toxic, we have too high of the common mold, and we would still take care of the air on that. Yes.
Can you talk about what kind of allergies people may have to mold?
It varies. Like my wife's allergic to penicillin, so Aspergillus penicillium. I check my house once a year for that. I have purifiers that take it out of here and kill it. But some people, I studied under a lady named Dr. Rapp. She was an allergist. she would videotape her clients, and some of them, would not have they couldn't remember 5 minutes ago what they did, they have rashes. So the memory loss, some of them went into fetal positions. So it's often a divided family, because a husband says, my wife, she's just crazy, and she's not got issues, so, and my doctor says it's not a big deal, and I just say get a different doctor. I'm dealing with 7 people right now that have toxicity in their blood, and it's from 25 years old to 75 years old. I just dealt with a gentleman who just had to stop playing golf, he couldn't remember his keys, and got him on a regimen through a functional medicine doctor, and now he's back to golf, he remembers, he doesn't have to go to a care facility. You just don't know, everybody's different, again, getting good science behind it is important. Anyways, we go over a long time with it.
It basically like an autoimmune response, it depends on the person and how they respond. So someone, you have 2 people allergic to the same mold and they react differently. I've heard people losing their hair, becoming paralyzed, it just depends on that body's response to their environment.
And most molds your body will take out. If you have a good gut biome, 80% of your health's in your guts, right? So if you have a good gut biome, mold will just go out of your body. But sometimes, you've been in it long enough, then you've got the toxin in mold that can bind itself in your body. So you have to take clays and binders and some other things like that. And that's all functional medicine doctor stuff. There's not a lot of them in the area. I'm always trying to find good doctors to refer people to, because most doctors like, we've got mold. I'm like, no. We have mold, but people are really sick from this, and not most of us aren't. I've been doing this for 19 years, and I don't feel affected, but let's take it seriously when we.
Okay, perfect, so.
Address the after.
That's for Jill's.
Yeah, because doesn't that come from plants from outside?
Well, yeah, so why is it inside, right? So if it's inside, like even house plants, when I go into a situation, I see a bunch of house plants, I recommend getting them out, because you get all the dirt's got mold in it, right? So get a fake plant, and it used to be a good idea to have fresh air from plants, but we buttoned our houses up to where that toxicity, like the space station, they were trying to grow plants and they were dying, and so they had to come up with a technology that had a hydroxyl that broke that down so they could grow, because the molds and everything else were making people sick. So yeah.
But can I make a comment? Cause a lot, home inspectors are notorious for leaving doors open for periods of time during an inspection, and buyers are standing in the doorway. And so I would say that's a professional like you versus a home inspector taking the air samples. From experience.
Right.
They have been bad experiences for my buyers.
Yeah, so if you've ever worked with me, you'll know I want to come a half hour before anybody else gets there. Because before all the doors are open, before people start to leaving doors open, I want to get there to get a true sample. Leave the windows closed for 24 hours, in good weather. We hardly do that anymore, but leave the windows closed for 24 hours. Let me get there after before anybody else. And if I can get my inside samples, then that's what I need. And I can do the physical stuff after that, but I need to get the true sample, from the air. Yes.
Would you recommend a dehumidifier in addition to the AC?
Dehumidifiers are good up north, like the basements and stuff, but here you want to use your air conditioning effectively. I do have some older folks who say I'm always cold, so I'll say get a dehumidifier that has a pump that discharges like in your shower, but they also put off heat. Older people who are thin, or whoever, that if you know that you can't run your air conditioning at 75 because that's what the humidity demands, then you get a dehumidifier. It's just more costly, it puts off heat, you gotta worry about whether that leaks. So normally you wanna use your air conditioning more effectively. 1 degree at a time will make a huge difference in humidity. Get behind you. So.
How much do you charge?
It depends on the size of the house, right? And what, like I'll usually ask the question, do you see anything or smell anything, right? Because then I need to know that I have to take some more physical samples than I normally would. So its average is about $125 a sample. That's me paying the microbiologist. So an average, say 2,000 square foot house would be $375 to $500. And if I find issues, then it's more money because I take more samples. And then if I find it's a bigger thing, like remediation has to happen, then I have to write a protocol, which is $300 to $400 more. And that's when I recommend Julia to get on.
One thing I want to mention, we do get reports from other people calling it mini remediation. And we have been astounded by some of the pricing that we've seen from so-called air assessors that have done very few samples. And we keep a very short list, and Doug of course on that list, of people that do a fair job, do a fair price, and give you a report that is extremely credible. I've seen some reports that were written like by third graders. So do vet them, ask for a sample give them examples of the work that you've done, and ask them, do you do remediation protocols? That's the word protocol. And if you get kind of a blank stare at the word protocols, then you know this is not somebody who really can walk you through the whole process.
Of course, all this sounds scary, and if I have a client, I'm showing them their smell, their smell, this sort of thing. I think the best thing I can do is educate them on the things that they can do to, once I purchase a home to remediate it. But how successful is remediation these days? Because, that's probably the biggest concern for somebody. Would it come back in 6 months where,
That's where, I do the assessing and write the protocol. Julia would do the remediation. I come back and do a post-remediation verification. So it's more money. So I spend that money, you spend that money, whoever does, send it to the microbiologist. So you've got multiple licenses, mine, hers, the microbiologist, who makes you whole, write a report that says it's clear. And so at that point, everything that can be done about mold has been done and as a snapshot in time. So we don't know what's gonna happen in the environment later, but if they follow our protocol, then it should be fine. And I'm thinking of it, would my family live there when Julie's done? So I'll fail them, or at least conditionally pass them if I find something, because I don't wanna, I'm not easy on anybody. I'm educating remediators all the time, and Julie's company passes all the time. So it's just, just let's make sure we're doing the science, but I think people can have a peace of mind after we're done.
If you do the whole process, then you can have peace of mind, but a lot of it depends on making sure that most of the mold issues are caused by water. So as long as the moisture has been solved, if it's a leaky air conditioner, like it's one thing for us to do that, but if you keep the problem still exists, leaky roof, this sort of thing, then that's when it may reoccur despite everything that we've done. Now, the protocol will have, every example of what we should do, but some of it may be on the owner too, that you need to replace AC units or get new ductwork or whatever. And if the homeowner doesn't follow all of those, then it could recur.
And Jeff, the ultraviolet lights that and those are good for preventing mold buildup in the air handler.
UV lights are good for the coil only. It takes 8 seconds for UV to kill anything, so UV light over the coil is good. There are other technologies that use UVC, which is the UV bulb, coupled with peroxides, and that's energized, it creates a hydroxyl. So you put that in your supply pump, and that cleans purifies the ducts, and then comes out on your surfaces. It kills mold, bacteria, viruses. So that's a great technology. UV is good for the coil, but there's a probe that does a better job.
what did you say that was?
What was the second thing you said?
It's a HVAC probe, so a lot of HVAC guys can put them in. If you have questions about the better ones, you can email me. My card's in the back. I have one more technology that has one more technology that nobody else has. It's a great. The back.
So I worked as a consumer reporter in Miami in the 80s where they had flat roofs and saw mushrooms growing on carpets, on renting properties. And they then I think banned flat roofs. Has architectural requirements changed to accommodate this, and what external things can we do to be
I'm dealing with flat roofs right now with water issues and chemistries I've used things that people are sick from. So it's not a great technology. I don't know why they're still doing it, except that it's easier, but the membranes fail and they've got to be looked at constantly. So I don't know if that answers your question.
So they're not banned.
Flat roofs.
Yeah, flat roofs, in Pearl.
Can you tell the difference in when you see the count of mold spores? Are they alive or dead? Are these mold spores that die, or do they just kind of
That's why the remediation has to happen, because what we call, even if it's dead, we call it, it can be broken mold, like a hateful, called hateful. That can reconstitute itself with the right, with mold, heat, and protein. So mold can reconstitute itself, that's why the gross cleanup needs to be done, as well as the air, taken care of as well. So that's part of the color.
One thing that's important to know, a lot of people go, why do you have to tear the mold out? One thing I want to mention, of course, the building material, that the mold is on there, the mold is eating it. It's food to them, and that's what's keeping them going along with the moisture and pH cellulose. So the thing to keep in mind is that even dead mold can make you sick. So if you can, do the things where you're trying to tear stuff out and flying everywhere, even if the mold has been killed by fireflies or whatever, they still can make you sick. And like as Justin said, that it can grow back regardless. And something that has been found with mold is hydrophobic. So if you were to spray stuff on some mold, it will react by sporulating, by going, wait a minute, I don't like being sprayed on, and will start spraying out more spores. So you've got to be very careful. You can actually cause a problem trying to fix it. You don't know it is.
Yeah, and bleach is a misnomer, so don't use bleach on mold, it just feeds it. It makes it it makes it go clear, but it feeds the roots and comes out with a vengeance. We found that in Katrina, the government didn't know that at that point, and a lot of people, they go back and clean that kind of mold off of newly installed. In the very back, sorry.
Yeah, so I guess the handyman that says, hey, we'll just put some Kills paint over that, we'll encapsulate the mold on the wall. Yeah.
He just created more food for the mold. So that Kills has a little bit of antimicrobial, but it's actually food. So mold's stomach is on its outside. So it's it digests whatever it's on, except that the hard, like here, mold is still growing on a hard surface, but it doesn't have much to grow on except for what's coming to it from the air. But the porous, as Julie said, the porous materials, like paint, people paint over stuff all the time, and 3 months later, molds come back to the vengeance, you just add it. Crazy.
So you're saying that cleaning with bleach doesn't clean anything?
It makes it go clear, so it looks like you got it. But think of bleach, if you know chemistry, it's 99% water and corrosive. So it's gonna be the roots, and then if there are nails there, they'll make it a little rusty, and then you'll have a compromised place. So you can use bleach on hard things like your tubs and sinks and stuff, but nothing worse. Yeah.
How about vinegar?
Vinegar is good, vinegar, and enzymes. And then Julia's got other chemicals you can't buy that are better. So you really want to properly remediate it, but as a homeowner, vinegar is still pretty good. Anything else on that, Julia, anything else on that?
In terms of bleach, thing about mold, like the on the surface, you can use Dawn. I mean, it's easy to clean up. You don't have to use something corrosive. And bleach is not a disinfectant, meaning it's not a soap. And you can't disinfect something that's not clean. So you have to clean it and then you disinfect it. So bleach is just kind of a shortcut. And we've all had like showers and the mold comes back. And it's kind of, well, what the heck? I just put bleach on it because it's like, no, we're here. So that's why you gotta clean anything before you get disinfected. We do use a lot of hydrogen peroxide based products. We don't use chlorine bleach, or chlorine base to get rid of stains and that sort of thing. But really, a lot of it's just physically removal of the building material is really what it takes.
And not the regular peroxide you're using at the sink, it's a 20% or better. So it's a very tough on your skin, so you don't want to just buy that food grade peroxide and try to use it yourself. Yes, Red?
I have a two-part question. First, could you touch on wall units? Some of our condos have small wall units. And it seems to, they're really dirt, like the outside are really dirty when you get in there. Can you touch on those at all?
Yeah, they're notorious for mold. There's a calfskin in there that rolls all the time, and you look in there at a good light, and you're like, oh, it's like a scary forest. So those have to be cleaned. I have one company that they do that full time because they're so bad in hotel rooms and all these schools, but they really need to be cleaned and looked at. And they don't have a great screen, so they don't really filter. Oil get filthy, but it's really that rolling cat skin is always full of growth. and everything.
So those need to be cleaned.
Absolutely, yeah,
Quite
like,
often. What about mold in a refrigerator? I've seen, mold on the bottom of the refrigerator and the freezer and.
usually it means your gaskets are best, the gasket on the refrigerator needs to be replaced usually. But there are also technologies that you can put in your refrigerators that are rechargeable, that will help break that down, but you should do the original,
Thank you.
Well, let's circle back to Paul, asking what happens if we do find a bad report, an inspection happened, differences between as-is and standard contract, you can touch on that.
Certainly, as you all know, the as is, basically there is no threshold of repairs that need to be done, stay under the contract, like in a car bar. Oh, sorry. There's no threshold repairs that needs to be done to stay under the contract. If the repairs exceed that amount, then you can walk. You don't have that in the as is. Basically, if there's an issue, the parties can either work it out or they walk. And with an as is, with a lot of these mold, estimates, a lot of times, sometimes it's sticker shock, I guess, for the would-be seller. They're counting on a certain amount of money and sometimes they hem and haw as to how much they're willing to do, and it gives the buyer an out because there is obviously an issue that's been noted, a remedy that needs to be made, and if they're not willing to do it, at least the buyer's remedy is at least getting their earnest money back. It does give the seller a chance to punt, and sadly, hope they find somebody a little more gullible. The problem is once you have that bad report, you don't have the remediation and the post done. It's something that they do have to disclose. The seller has to disclose going forward. If it ever came out that buyer number one bought because of this and they just forget the report ever existed and buyer number two picks it up and finds out later on, the realtor and the seller will potentially liable for any issues of the cleanup. That
Does the seller have the right to do their own, inspection and?
I mean, they can, of course, they can do their own inspection, and they can, they go back and forth on what, I guess really what it is not just the inspection, but it's the remediation, what's recommended, what protocol is recommended. And that's really where the rubber meets the road in terms of cost for the seller. They can do their own, and then it's up to the buyer and the buyer's agent to, say, well, we think this is valid, we don't think it's valid. And oftentimes when you get, I see some heads shaking. Oftentimes you get to the point where people are just too far apart with the as is, it gives both parties an out. It's maybe not ideal, obviously, as realtors, your job is to, turn these properties to, get buyers and sellers happy and, close the deal. But, the as is does give, in a way, it gives both parties an out.
well, as realtors, it may be helpful to you that if you walk the property, you look at all the closets and under sinks and stuff and say, we probably need to do a preliminary mold inspection before we put this on the market. Let's get everything fixed. That way it saves time, things close down. So the smarter realtors are thinking that way because they're like, if this is gonna shut this down or even lose a sale, well, what's a few $100 to get it right? And then we remedy it, and then we don't have to even disclose that because it was something simple. But if it's something bigger, get it done, and you say, here's the paperwork, we've done the work, and we can prove it under licenses, and so do you want it or not? But if you do that while you're in contract, it's, you know what it is.
We have a question.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so in the as-is contract, there is no language in that contract to protect you, so you do need to use the mold denim, correct?
Well, there is the inspection allowance already in the as is. That's why it was deemed redundant. But it doesn't specifically, the inspection clause and all that information doesn't specifically, say, this must be resolved and all of that. But basically the people at Bar determined that it wasn't necessary, that you didn't need to have a separate rider. As a buyer, you have the option of asking for them to use it. They're not required to use it. It's all considered under an as-is situation. It's usually all those inspections would need to take place during your inspection period. And if there's an issue, you know, that's why it's good to have someone who has a good relationship with the lab that can turn it around quickly. Because you've got to get that, if there's an issue during the inspection period, you have to let, if you're buyer's agent, you have to let the seller know there's an issue in time, in case they choose not to cure it, that you can walk and your client can keep their earnest money. So, you know, that's where it comes in handy, having somebody who actually knows what they're doing, knows they can turn around quickly, yes.
So that language is in both contracts, so if my client wants to do a mold inspection in that 50-day or 10-day due diligence, he has that right to bring a mold inspector in.
Well, it was deemed to be, please.
Yeah, let me just
Yes,
address
please.
that. The standard contract, mold is not a warranted item. So you need a mold addendum in a standard contract if you want to be able to cancel based on mold. There's a threshold in the mold addendum, and if you exceed the threshold, the buyer has the right to cancel. When we did that mold addendum, we looked at two different ways. One, like in the standard repair limits for general, if the seller does the excess repairs, the buyer's locked in. We opted not to go that way and put a threshold in there that allows the buyer to terminate the contract if it exceeds the mold limit. That is only used in the standard contract, because in the as-is contract, you can inspect for anything and cancel for anything.
Right.
So you don't need a mold addendum that gives you a threshold with the ability to cancel, because you can already cancel for any reason. But in the standard contract, you cannot cancel. It has to exceed the repair limit, and the seller can do the repairs to keep you in it. But for mold, that addendum, you reach a threshold, you have a right to cancel. Carte blanche. Seller can't say, well, I'm doing the repairs, you're locked in. Nope, that's the way the mold addendum is written. So only use it on a standard contract, not an as.
I stand corrected. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Once the repair has been done, is there another checking to make sure that everything has been remediated?
There's a post-remediation verification. So I come in with post-testing visually and physically in air samples, and then write that, or if they have some mold left, but it's not a lot, I'll make it conditional. The remediator comes back and finishes that. I get pictures and I write a pass. So you pass, so yeah, so you've got all three licenses involved in the post-testing as well.
But one thing we should mention is not all of our clients opt to have a post-remediation verification. They come to the compliment, but on the other side, they don't have that guarantee from the assessor that everything has been picked up. And I would like if they have this, because there are neurotoxins mold and you don't want to mess around with them. But because there is, a smaller additional cost, some people do just opt out of it. So you want to make sure you get the PRV, the post-remediation verification done, for your client to get that peace of mind.
Does anybody identify the source in any of your reports?
Yes, I do.
So at least the buyer will know what they need to remedy.
Right. That's where the protocol comes in, and we have to leave some leeway because some of this may be hidden. So the remediator, they, in their costs, they have to factor in some of the process that, because the protocols, where mold is present, you go 2 feet beyond what is either wet or has microbial growth. Sometimes you have to take a whole sheet of drywall, which you don't know until you get behind it. And they set that under containment plastic, so they're able to do it right away. But sometimes there's a change order that has to happen because it's something bigger. You don't know.
We've seen things where we thought it was safe and it turned out that the dishwasher, and you take out the cabinet and the entire kitchen is covered. You don't know till you get into it, but we were able to figure out roughly the area, based on the protocol. Protocol really is a fancy word for instruction for the remediator.
And that's why I don't want just a contractor to do this, because you may think it's the same, you just take it out, but it's bigger. And they basically, I would say like, if you try to walk through a dandelion field without kicking a dandelion, can you do it? And mold's even smaller, so you pull that sink out and also there's more behind it. It's through your whole air conditioning system, it's through your whole, so all of a sudden, even 3 weeks after that guy had done that, the family's getting sick and they don't know why. So you really need a licensed remediator who sets up containment with plastics, no poly, and then machines inside creating negative air, so it's not pushing that out, but it's pulling it into that space so it doesn't escape. And that's why it's so expensive to do the remediation, but what's your health? Your health is your wealth, really is.
And in our team, we have to wear Tyvek suits, we're wearing respirators. Mold is typically from like 0.2 microns to like 20. And I have the back anything from 0.3, so that's constantly running as we're doing that work. But like our plastic that he's referring to, it's not saran wrap, it is 6 millimeters thick. And we have to hang it from any, and then we have to have a special barrier where we walk in and out of it. So if they can't do remediation, that's part of the people, when they try to do it themselves, they cross-contaminate. They'll take out stuff and then it's going everywhere and they think they're being careful, but it just, there's so much to it.
If you did, just like a general test of someone's home and you found that the AC unit, like in the ducts, there was some findings, do you have your own, just ducts, HVAC cleaning service that you do, or would you recommend an HVAC person? Do you trust any of them to do that type of cleaning?
And in terms of the HVAC and the mold, legally, we outsource that because we want to sometimes get into the actual unit to do cleaning. We don't have the license for that. I don't even want to pretend to do that. We do partner with HVAC partners that will actually do like negative pressure. And in most cases, if it's a metal duct, you do have to, mechanically agitate the mold, but you've got to get it in a negative pressure instead of collecting it and not making it more pervasive. And on that point, let's say we're doing a kitchen, we do have it plastic enclosed in containment. Every register in that home, we will cover with plastic encasement so that it won't cross-contaminate the work that we do.
National Area Association said if there's mold that's proven, then it has to be, the ducts have to be replaced. But if it's growing, if it's just dust and with mold, then they can clean it. But if it's growing, sometimes I'll get in, and most mold is within the last 3 feet of a duct, so I can see it, and then I'll say that needs to be replaced. Or it needs to, some HVAC companies, not very many, can actually clean it very well and then encapsulate it with a black 900 product. So it's a little bit of a science, and it's a science, but a little bit of art as well. We don't want to have to spend $5,000 to replace your ducts if it's just a couple of places in the back.
Sorry if I missed this. I know that you guys said depending on the house size, about $500 for the testing part. But what about the remediation? About how much does that go for?
What's the remediation cost? She heard $500 from me. But the remediation, just put it 10 times, 100 times. Okay.
Yeah.
Depending on the size, so Florida has a statute if it's under 10 contiguous square feet that the homeowner can actually do it. And if it's something where it's in a closet or something, then you can bring this in. It actually could be probably about 500 if it's truly contained and you know the source and it's not spread everywhere. It comes to the level of damage. It can come to the size of the home. How pervasive is it? If it's just in the kitchen, we just have to do a kitchen, that's one component. If you have, after Ian, there was one house we went through on a 6-room house and it looked like leopard spots throughout the entire home. And because the damage was so pervasive, FEMA wouldn't even let them fix it because it had to go to code. But for us, like our jobs are typically kind of depending on, all those factors, which are myriad. We've had some old jobs for a couple thousand, but I've had some up to 50.
There's a software program that they have to run it through, and the insurance companies allow them to use a certain software, so everything's a little different. Yeah, right.
As realtors, this is probably a legal question, but as realtors, there's a lot of flips. Houses that they buy, that the people turn the air conditioning off. I have been in them where I've seen people, crawling up the wall, black, that I'm not going in here, I don't want you to go in here either. But then somebody comes in and beats over it. Do we have any responsibility, and, could we report this somewhere? Yeah, should we?
Okay.
As realtors, what kind of responsibility?
Right, now, towards the back, there's the seller's property disclosure, and I've run into this a lot with people back when flipping was very common. The flippers would turn around and oftentimes they just tell the realtors, just say, no, we've been through, we didn't see this, whatever.
And we've never lived here.
We've never lived here.
here. They don't do a seller's disclosure because they've never lived in a home.
Right, or they'll just straight don't knows, and from a CYA standpoint, I probably, now, it would send alarm bells for me if I were a prospective buyer, if I saw straight don't knows. But I would, if I'm a seller's agent and somebody, that has no experience, any real experience in the property, who just went in there and did some cosmetic work, I would have a tough time believing if they had a bunch of no's there, because they really don't know. If they do something like that where they're covering up something and they're saying they don't know or no, I would punt. That's just me, because when people ask me to do things that I think are unethical, I'm sorry, there's a door. And at the end of the day, you'll be grateful that you're not dealing with that person, either in that transaction or subsequent one. The other thing I run into a lot, doing probate work as well, is you have a lot of times, nobody really kept in touch with mom and they have no idea what condition she kept the house in. And they get these things and they're like, seriously? So, have them sit down in line by line, If you know they're not being truthful on something, you either tell them to fix it on the spot or you punt. You owe it to yourself, you owe it to your name, your license, your reputation.
Now, I'm sorry, before we move on to more questions, because I knew this was gonna be a hot topic, we just have a few other things, so maybe just shelve those questions just for a moment, and at the end, we'll go over as much as we can. But I think as realtors here, the audience here is realtors, and Paul, I kind of want to ask, where is the point of firing the seller that fails to disclose after maybe they've gone through an inspection and it fell apart? Or after they've remedied something themselves but refused to get a post done on that? Where's that fine line for us?
I haven't seen, that many realtors, their representation contracts, but there's usually some language in there that as a realtor, you're not gonna stick your neck out for somebody if they're doing something that's dishonest, unethical. There's usually some language in there to that extent. If they're acknowledging they're not gonna do the post evaluation, they're not gonna do the verification, that I don't think comes down to being unethical or lying or being, deceitful. I think that's room for disagreement. You can still have them on board. You can ask them to do it, but I don't think that's something where I don't think you can obligate them to do it. It would probably make sense. Since they're gonna have to disclose that they had an issue and they remediated it. But certainly if I were you, if there's any situation where, and I've heard people say this back in the day, back when you had all the flippers, the sellers would sit there and they just throw the seller disclosure back to the realtors and they just say, put whatever. Maybe put straight don't knows, put knows, whatever. I don't remember seeing any of this stuff. I didn't ask my crew, they didn't tell me anything about it. And I think at that point, it's up to you, but I think your license is worth more than maybe any one given transaction.
And I also presume that a seller who knows that they are not required to fill it out in writing, they're just required to disclose according to law. If we have a client like this, and we know it's flipped, or we know it's had some issues, I would imagine you would guide us not to work with that client, as there is, potential for failure to disclose when you might know something or maybe even just suspect something.
Well, if you look here at the seller's property disclosure, at the very bottom, it cites a case from back in 1985, Johnson v. Davis. Anything that can materially affect the value of a property, if it is not disclosed, is potentially fair game for litigation. And, taking the extreme, I've heard people try to use, is this place haunted or, yes, ma'am?
Well, the other thing I was gonna say is it's not just the seller that has to, it's required to disclose also.
Correct.
Any other agency agreements, they are required to disclose any permit facts. So whether the seller wants to do it or not, the agent is not really also disclose.
Correct. And under this case, and again, it's well-established case law, we're going on 85, we're going on 40 years. That's frightening. God, again, the realtor is liable. The realtor is obligated, not just the seller. So you don't want to stick your neck out for somebody who's not going to be forthright about things. Now, if it's haunted, that's up to you. But things that you can actually point to, like, yes, they did mold and they just put kills over top of it and they're crossing their fingers, they can sell it before it grows back. You want to run for the hills.
And would you recommend that be a written disclosure into the MLS as an attachment maybe, or just acknowledgement back, so that you remove the liability, you've done you follow the law?
Oof. I mean, that's, talk about putting somebody on the spot. I mean, if they're willing to stay with you, I think you have to make that disclosure. If they choose to part ways because you're not willing to play ball with that, I think maybe there's an obligation, if you find out that this was somebody else, maybe to notify the other listing agent. I don't know if you want to run the risk of somebody, if there's something you can't prove 100%, you maybe run the risk of the seller turning around and suing you for making false statements or disparaging their property. I think there is some obligation to at least notify a subsequent listing agent if you know about it. For CYA purposes. If you're not handling that listing anymore, then it's up to somebody else to actually disclose that. But I think you need to put the other listing agent on notice that that's their obligation now. I see some heads.
Which number are you talking about?
Oh, on the disclosure? I mean, specifically, I guess in this case, we'd be talking about, well, you have down in South County, you've got water intrusion, drainage, flooding. Also, you can have any issues, any number of issues related to that, house apartments, whatever, but in general, you'll have flippers and other people, heirs will come in and they're like, I don't know any of this stuff. I don't think any of this is a problem. And I mean, to me, it would set alarm bells off. If I saw a disclosure that said straight don't knows. But
And also number 9, I believe, the environmental component.
yes,
Under B.
yes,
And C.
yes. Anything could lead to an environmental hazard, including not limited to lead-based paint, asbestos, mold, beer formaldehyde, yada, yada, yada.
So Paul, being that we're in Florida, we had Hurricane Ian, September 28th, 2022. We had a lot of homes damaged, closer to the south part
Yes.
of the county. What is the best course of action, knowing that we have seller's disclosure to verify and represent and disclose properly? How far do we go as agents to make sure that, aside from just asking, did you have a claim? Are we required to make sure it was closed, that it was remedied properly, that we had a post, how far do we go?
Ideally, you want at least, if there was a claim, you want to acknowledge that there was a claim. You probably want to show proof that it was closed for obvious reasons, because if it's closed, that means at least the insurer was happy with the outcome. That they, in most cases, do a inspection, verification afterwards. I mean, even if it's been repaired, you still have to acknowledge that there's been an issue. Has past or present water intrusion affected the property? Doesn't say, but it was repaired, it's okay. You don't have to list it as yes. So these are still yeses. If you have an E in house, you're gonna have a lot of yeses in number 3 and on 9B. Well, actually, B you wouldn't have if it's been remediated, because it doesn't exist right now. If it's been remediated, you have that verification. Part of me says if you don't have that post verification, you may want them to say don't know, even though you've already done yes on all these 3s. Because without that post verification, you don't have concrete proof that it doesn't exist. That's why oftentimes it's money very well spent.
Yeah.
But then you can put that no on 9B. But if there's past or issues, these I say past or present. So if it happened, even if it was remediated, you have to acknowledge it happened. there's no way around that just because they took care of it or said they took care of it.
And Jeff, we have inspection companies out there. If you could just sum up in a quick answer, what's the difference between hiring an inspection company that does home inspection, 4-point and Windmid, that might have a little extra add-on a la carte, doing a mold inspection or an air test or something along those lines versus hiring you or a company like yours? What's the difference there?
There's some home inspectors out there that have a CMA, it's a certified mold inspector, and so what they do is they often say for a few more $100, I'll take 2 air samples, one inside, one outside, and then you get that report back with their home inspection, and they say you've got mold, but then they don't tell you what to do with it, about it, is it high, what the problem is, and so then often the homeowner or you have to call me and pay me over and above that to actually do the proper assessment, and it's gonna cost more money. But I'm gonna give you the recommendations and we can clear it or not, but it's kind of, they're doing a disservice. I mean, I've run across them a few times and I'm like, guys, I mean, stay in your lane, he's got the license, but he's not following what the real training is to make it right. So I mean, use them for home inspectors if they're good, but I would stay away from them as a mold inspector because they're not giving you the results and what to do with it.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that, they're adding it as an additional service, but it's basically just a yes or no, and there's no depth to it, and that's kind of like if you do need, that if it sets off alarm bells, that's when you really do need the expert. And that's one of the questions of if you think that they're selling themselves, because the market could change a little bit. Some of the home inspectors are telling people that they are mold sensors. And that's one of the knockout questions is, oh, have you done protocols? If they haven't done, that's kind of, you need to dimension the boys, like the ones that haven't, if they don't know what a protocol is, then that tells you we really don't know the process.
Is the negative air thing part of a protocol that you're talking about?
If the remediation requires containment, then we would use negative air. The whole point is to have everything enclosed with plastic, and then we use an air scrubber, reverse it so that the air is being pulled out. You'll see hospitals will do the same thing for bacterial type things and viruses. Like for COVID, you'll see that some rooms are clean rooms and they have like the very same kind of concept so that you can keep that from going elsewhere. Because in terms of mold, the most common way that we're affected is breathing it in. So that takes care of that, and for us, as we're cleaning, as we're cutting affected materials, it's going to possibly have mold come off of that, so that captures that. And we keep that running for days, the whole time we're working, we change out the filters, so that we keep that environment as mold-free as possible.
Yeah, we want to make sure, once the remediation is done, the scrubbers are running for 2 days before I come in. So we want to make sure anything's a spore is being captured. So you have to leave that in your mind when you're thinking about when we close this house, is you got to give us 2 days just to let the scrubbers run, no people coming into it, do the post testing and the results the next day. So it is time consuming. You got to change your contract sometimes. But again, it's protecting everybody.
Scrubbers are the big.
Yeah, they have they've got 3 filters, one to that size, and they change those pre-filters every time, within a certain amount of hours.
I will tell you, I have a listing right now where it has just been a nightmare with mold. And so we initially did, the seller hired a mold inspection company to come in and did an air quality test, outside, inside, tested okay. Buyer had a specialist like you come in, not okay. Someone was asking about cost of remediation. On this case, it's $18,000 and the rebuild is $30,000.
Is a HEPA filter just a good preventative for everybody to have in their house?
It's a it is. If you think of, I'm trying to catch a mouse, do I want a mouse trap? Probably. So the HEPA is kind of a mouse trap for dust. It's not killing anything, it's just filtering the particulates in your air. So you may want to couple it with an active purifier as well that kills stuff.
I just want to know how long to go to remediation, how long does it take? How many days, how much time does it take?
Well, once we get the protocol and it's on the schedule, we would give an estimate of how long we think it would be. Like if it's a mold bloom and that's just a lot of labor, then generally a few days between the cleaning and the air scrubbing, the air cleaned, and it might fog it at the end, so we kind of get the last little bit. So it's like a few days for that. On a typical kind of mold issue, let them come from water losses. And if that occurs, that can be several days. We have to go through the testing process. We will go in and the containment involved. Then we're taking out building materials. We're kind of going through that whole process. And then we have a post test. So generally, it's probably about a week for those kind of jobs. So that's not like a whole house sort of situation. But if it does involve demolition, taking off cabinets, that sort of thing, we remediate. We take out the defective materials. We make sure that you can go in that home and not be afraid that there's anything remaining. We take out like all your personal things and clean those or back them up to get them out of the equation of the testing. But you gotta keep in mind, that's our part. We are not at the point, our company at this point is not, we'll build it back. So you gotta think about the new kitchens, the cabinets, the flooring, possibly even the ceiling sometimes. We get a lot of those removed leaks. So just, again, it kind of depends on that whole process. Could be, several weeks or months, but our part generally will be, in worst case, it could be shorter, it could be a little longer, depending.
Now, before we keep going on mold, because it'll become a whole mold panel here. If you could please go to your last page. And Paul, if you could please go over, just very briefly, we have about 14 minutes left for questions and going over this. What else do we experience here in Florida? What else do we run into? Visual comment, visual comment.
Okay, I mean, some of these are kind of become rare, unless anybody's dealing with real estate way out east where you're getting the old farmland, you probably won't run into issues with arsenic, but if any of the people that, if any of the people are doing the bigger developments that are still out east that used to be ag land, you may want to have somebody, an environmental assessor, somebody, or yourself, hold the old aerials. If you're buying an old farm, you can actually see some of these if they were cattle farms where they had the cattle dipping bats, where they actually run the cattle through arsenic salts. Very rare, but if you're buying land way out east, it's a potential problem. Asbestos is the biggest issue for most people now is if you buy houses that are like late 70s or pre-70s or through the 70s and early 80s. The popcorn ceilings oftentimes contain asbestos, and they used to tell people just wet sand them, and no. If there's any question about whether they have asbestos, if they're certainly before 1980, pretty much guarantee they do. They were led to use leftover materials into the early 80s. That stuff oftentimes did have asbestos and probably does need to be removed professionally, because those loose fibers, once they're broken up, that's when they become a problem. Lead, if you're buying an older house, guess what? It's got lead paint. And, unless they totally ripped everything to the studs and there's no interior, exterior walls, in which case, I don't know what structure actually is at that point. They painted over it. It's, in most cases, if the nerd people leave it alone, even people with kids, they're like, okay, I don't see any broken pieces. It becomes an issue when they do the removal. So I always beg people, if they have an older house and they're worried about their kids having exposure to lead paint, they're like, oh, we gotta get rid of this now. I say, if you're serious about it, get a pro in there, because you bust all that up, that's when it becomes airborne, that's when it becomes a problem. We talked obviously about mold.
For lead, it was outlawed in 1978, used for residential properties. So to his point, people actually painted over that, but if it's a newer structure, you're typically not going to run into mold if it's built, say, at least in age. Asbestos, we've been networking with folks that are in this field, and that we're finding that the laws are not as strict as they were when they were first put out on asbestos, and that actually asbestos is kind of creeping back in materials that are coming, especially from overseas, but it's coming in different materials. So when we have work, especially commercial work, regardless of when the building is built, we will typically bring in, have somebody do an asbestos survey just to make sure, because it's $25,000 a day if you're ripping out asbestos and you didn't do your due diligence on it.
And also with the asbestos, I didn't mention the floor tiles. There were a number of floor tiles in that area that you had mentioned also that had the asbestos as well.
Yes, they kind of in strange shape. There's like linoleum, but they're about 9 inches. And that's a very unusual size, and they're typically square. And we actually ran the process, we went to Texas, and we were taking off flooring planks off the floor that were laid over the asbestos, because the water had gone all the way down, like, oh crap. Then we had to bring in somebody to take care of the asbestos tile, because that was, beyond our purview, especially in a out of state type of situation.
Even Sarah Bradenton, I found, those tiles are still present, and then they use the mastic they use to put it down also as asbestos. So when we send it in, it's like you'll get a double thing. So that's something, that's almost worse than mold, because that you can't get that out of your lungs. You really need to test it.
The black mastic,
Mhm.
they used to put it down
Yep.
because of asbestos.
Yes.
I have a quick question. You know, everybody's using vinyl now on the floors. How do we know that it's okay? Because isn't that made like a petroleum product or whatever it's made from?
Well, yes, it is. And I think the issue, and I didn't put it on the list, but actually, if you look back at the seller's disclosure 9B, they talked about some of the other issues that I probably should have put on there. An issue particularly is not so much the vinyl flooring itself, with the installation, a lot of the adhesives that are used for that, for people who buy mobile homes, some of the adhesive used in there. And that was it 9B, I think it had, it mentioned urea formaldehydes, yeah. And a lot of the adhesives, they'll off-gas that for a period of time. And again, for exposure, I guess, I don't know where that would actually come up unless somebody had major, work done and involved gluing and a lot of stuff down, there'd be an immediate risk of that. But I mean, the issue probably isn't so much the vinyl in of itself, it's pretty inert. It used to be hazardous for people that made it because they didn't protect them. The individual vinyl monomers that they would put together to make the flooring and other materials, those are very hazardous for people who work around them. But once they're in that polymer, they're inert, they're not a major issue. The issue is, for the most part, is the adhesive used to attach those, to attach other materials in houses, in mobile homes, things like that.
There's a little bit of a dichotomy, because it's not illegal to have asbestos popcorn ceilings or the popcorn tile. The issue is when you mess with it.
Mhm.
So as long as you don't disturb it, you don't take it out, then you're, just don't touch it if you do have it. But if you do decide that you want to get down to the true subfloor, then that's something you definitely gotta take into account.
So if you have the popcorn ceiling removed, it has to be done professionally by because it's gonna get the mold and all the asbestos on your furniture or.
So if there's a roof leak or there's a popcorn ceiling, we have to get it tested if the building was, built for 78. Sometimes we'll do even more than that, just to, I'm sorry, Sydney.
Also going back on asbestos really,
Sorry.
that's okay. Going back on asbestos really quick, there are some other applications. There's external tiles. I actually have, my office has external tiles, 1925 farmhouse, and I've opted not to mess with them. I treat them with kid gloves. They've been painted over dozens of times over the years. If I ever were to have them removed, even though they're outside, I would have it done professionally. I would not sit there and, do it myself and inhale all those, busting them up. But I will tell you, as someone who owns a property with asbestos external shingles for the walls, it is very difficult to insure those properties. A lot of insurers won't touch them with a 10-foot poles. Just to give you a heads up, if you're buying these older, charming houses with the asbestos shingles on the walls. Yes, ma'am.
So when everybody, buys their new home and they wanna get their house remodeled and they have skinny in, take off the popcorn ceiling. Like, what is the professional way of doing it? Do they have to, are they supposed to test for it, test it, or?
That was bad. So don't be doing that. Basically, if we don't do asbestos, that's another license, that's a whole nother set of worms. But if we have a roof leak and we see the popcorn ceiling, we know the motor home, then we call, what you do?
Yeah.
That's the stuff. So we call Jeff and say, okay, we can go and for you, we can check, and they'll verify it. If it is a commercial building, so a lot of condos have like a condo apartment, we can ask, have you had an asbestos survey? And if they already have one on file, we can use that, we don't have to go, recreate the wheel, but if they don't, that's when we have to get it tested, and if it comes out positive, then what they'll do is bring in an asbestos abatement team, and kind of does what we do, but they do only with asbestos. Like, the difference is, like asbestos, if they find it, it's gotta be specially disposed of. For mold, they can actually, foreign and recurrent organism, we can just throw that in the garbage can and that hopefully they will.
Sorry, I guess that's what I'm kind of asking. Who is supposed to remove the popcorn ceilings when people just don't like popcorn ceilings and they just want a flat ceiling?
Yes, asbestos has remediators.
Test it first.
Yeah, you'd have Jeff test it first, and then if it's found to be positive for asbestos, then you would have someone who specializes in that.
They still have a set of containment, they, just like mold, they have a set of containment, they can't let that escape into the air conditioning or in other parts of the building, so they have the best thing is just to encapsulate it, but if you're gonna take it off, it's gotta be under containment. And it's very, the fibers are very dangerous, so we really need to do it the right way.
They'll go deep into your lungs.
Yeah.
Was asbestos in popcorn sealant outlawed at a certain point, with a 1990 house with popcorn
The
sealant?
law passed in 1989, but again, there was another law passed, I think in 91 or something shortly after that, that kind of unraveled some of the teeth that was in that law. And I've talked to people that do abatement, and they've said that they've really kind of gone loose on it. And unfortunately, for someone like us, if we were to remove it, find out after the fact, oh no, it wasn't asbestos, even though it was a 1985 building or something. And if we were discovered by the EPA, it would be $25,000 a day that we did that on. So and it's unfortunate that now it can be more pervasive, but yet the onus is on us to make sure that it's not in materials that shouldn't have been legal anymore anyway, but kind of are.
And Paula, regarding helping our clients that may have questions with the seller's property disclosure, regarding popcorn ceilings on a, let's just say 1967 built condo, are we to tell them, yes, it has it? Or are we kind of like paint, all paint before 78 had lead?
I think we have to get them prepared to assume it has it. I mean, if it's popcorn, it appears to be untouched, I mean, you can't say with 100% certainty, just like Jeff will say, they want, when a lawyer or realtor just pointing and saying, oh, that's mold. It's the same thing. You don't want me to say with absolute certainty it is popcorn, but the popcorn has asbestos in it, but it's a very good chance that texture has asbestos in it.
So should we help guide them with a yes, or a don't know, or a, would you like to get this tested? How do we guide them so that we remove liability, do the right thing, don't risk our license, and, just don't not mess it up?
For that one, for the 9B, if you're talking about something like that, where it's not an absolute gimme, I would personally feel comfortable with the don't know. Because they honestly don't know until they actually test it and you're 100% certain. If you're a buyer's agent, and you see these things, you may want to bring it to their attention. It's up to you that it may or may not be. And if, as a buyer, if you want to assume that risk, then it's up to you. But if you're talking about 9B on the seller's disclosure, because you don't know for certain, my temptation is to say don't know as it applies to the asbestos. I mean, again, the property, they have on the lead one, they have on 9A, was the property built before 78? So that's when a lot of this stuff kicks in, when they start having the bans. So if it's before then, you're at least putting a notice that a good chance it does. So for CYA purposes, as a realtor, if the property is before 78, you make sure, because again, you'll see these flippers and they'll come in, or these airs, And of course, the house is before 78, or of course, the condo is before 78. But they're just gonna, straight don't know. And then the things that you do know to be a fact, I think you're obligated to say, yeah, that's a yes,
And last minute and a half, can you just touch on radon and underground storage tanks?
Okay, radon, basically, we don't have a lot of naturally occurring radon here because of what our substrata is. Folks in the Northeast, folks in the Midwest, you're used to granite and all that. You're gonna have a lot more radon. Radon is a breakdown product from uranium and other minerals. It's naturally occurring, it's radioactive, it can cause lung cancer. It's a bigger problem in the Northeast and the Midwest, but people will test for it. Unfortunately, we run into this, people will test it in a sealed house, putting their testers right on top of a granite countertop, which is off-gassing radon. So, it's a concern. I don't think it's a huge concern here as a normal course of things. People are concerned if they are somewhere near the former phosphate mines and things like that there might be some more issues of substrata, but certainly there are radon tests, and all I'm gonna say is, please make sure you don't put them on those granite countertops. Underground storage tanks, this is probably more of an issue for people, again, if they're buying older properties. For commercial properties, we used to have a trust fund in the state of Florida, but it's long since run out of funds. What you had is people were buying the old gas stations and they didn't want to be liable for leaking gas tanks. So a lot of money was spent to get those prime corner lots to, put your drugstores and whatever else in. And the state actually reimbursed people for those remediation costs. But I don't believe there's really any funds to speak of available for that. Your older homes, if you're buying in urban cores where there's older homes, there's probably at least a 50-50 chance that, because people don't usually remove them, that there's a fuel oil tank. Your liability is not usually as bad with those because they haven't been used in God knows how long, and if they've already drained out, it's probably been decades ago, so you're probably knocking on wood or fake wood, not on the hook for it. But if you have an older house and you're looking to sell it, you would probably, even if you're not sure, that's definitely one of those don't knows for 9B, because if you have a 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s house, there's a pretty good chance there was an underground fuel oil tank there.
Well, Jeff, Julia, Paul, thank you very much for this panel. Thank you everyone for attending. We have around for a few minutes. You guys have any more questions? Yes.
I would just like to put everybody on an FYI. This year, the Florida legislature passed a new bill regarding owners doing disclosure about water intrusion. That bill is more detailed than what's in the seller's property disclosure, and it's going to require specific questions be answered by the seller prior to entering into a contract. That bill becomes effective. I don't know if the governor signed it yet, but in October. So there will either be a new disclosure or potentially a new addendum to the contract with that language and those questions filled out, similar to right now we have an HOA rider and the seller fills those out at the time of listing and you put it in the MLS as an attachment. If this is a addendum, it will be something you will fill out at listing and put in as an attachment and be used as an attachment to the contract. Still not sure yet whether it'll become a separate disclosure or it will be an addendum. And the reason that I'm not sure about it yet is because the statute says that it must be disclosed prior to entering into a contract. Well, how do you do that on a simple disclosure? You do it in an addendum, then you know it's done prior to signing a contract. So not sure, stay tuned, there'll be more information on that, but it'll be more specific than the seller's disclosure, which by the way, not everybody fills out. So another reason why it might be an addendum. So that's coming.
In July 1st, passed the water law, where now they turn on going police to get the water out of property that's been vacant. So if that, the mold may be something you may encounter for these homes where people are finally getting the waters out. And so July 1st, you're able to get them all out of there, so that you have some opportunity for homes that have not been available because people were in them, and now that we're getting those people out, that may create some opportunities in terms of the real estate market too.
Thank you.
I think we're kind of finished up here. Denise, can we stick around a couple more minutes or are we good?
We might take two more questions.
Okay.
Yeah, and then, yeah, feel free to ask any questions, on your own afterwards. Share their information. Their cards are all here in the back.
With the hurricane problems that we've had here and a lot of roofs getting replaced, there have been roof leaks. And if it's a house that was built in the 20s, 2020 or earlier, if there's a stain on the ceiling, you need to be concerned about mold or
The documents say if water is, and then from a hurricane, that substrate needs to be taken out, because you don't know if it's just water, it could be petroleum, could be pesticides. So the manuals, if you know it's from hurricane driven water, says the substrate is
substrate as well.
the drywall.
In this case is talking about like the ceilings, like. under
Right,
the-
yeah, so the ceilings have been wet from hurricane and those, they, that's the ICRC 520. Yeah.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much to our panelists for taking their time out of their day today to share this information with you. Their cards are in the back, so please, help yourself and feel free to reach out to them at any time. Okay, thank you.
Can I stay there for just a minute? I want to get a nice picture.
I know.
Okay, 1 second. 1, 2.
Like tomorrow, just one picture.